February 21st. So thank you and hello everyone. Welcome to the first webinar with the University of Minnesota Extension Beef Genetics webinar series. Our presenter tonight is Melissa Runk, Extension Educator in Pipestone and Murray counties, and she'll be speaking on EPDs and selecting bulls. Before we get started, we want to let everyone on Zoom tonight, as well as those attendees watching on Facebook Live, know that we appreciate your questions and look forward to engaging you throughout tonight's presentation. So we should have our first poll going up now. And we'd like to know where everyone is joining us from tonight, and also how long you've been in the beef industry so that we can tailor our presentation to our audience. Excellent, thank you. And while we're filling that out, I'm just going to review a couple things about Zoom. I'm sure you're all super familiar. You can provide feedback or ask questions in several ways. You can use the mute button to unmute yourself at the end of tonight's presentations when we take questions. You can use the space bar to unmute yourself. You can also fill out questions in the chat box, which we highly encourage. Or you can send a direct message to either Stacy, myself, or Heather, and we can ask those on behalf of you when we're taking questions and having that discussion. So let's hop along to the our next slide, the beef team.
Sorry. There we go, sorry.
So members of the beef team include Dana Adams, that's me, Extension Educators Stearns, Benton, and Morrison counties, Karen Anderson, McLeod, Meeker, and Wright counties, Dr. Joe Armstrong, Cattle Production Systems Extension Educator, Stacy Cahy, Extension BQA Program Associate, Heather Default, Polk County Extension Educator, Brenda Miller, Tad County Extension Educator, Dr. Eric Mosel, Cow-Calf Management Extension Educator, Melissa Runk, our speaker, Pipestone Murray Extension Educator, Troy Salser, St. Louis County, and Terry Young, Carlton County Extension Educator. So we should be popping up on we should be running on Facebook Live right now. And Stacy, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I get the pleasure tonight of introducing our speaker, Melissa Runk. She is the local educator for Pipestone and Murray counties. She and her husband lived in Southwest Minnesota with their daughter, and they raised registered Herefords and Sim-influenced cattle and row crops. Their primary market is selling registered seed stock and groups of bred females. Melissa grew up on a Hereford and Angus operation in Southeast South Dakota and received her BS in animal science from South Dakota State University. She is currently completing her Master's of Applied Science in Beef Production specialization through the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a minor in ruminant nutrition. Take it away, Melissa.
Thank you, Stacy. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So yeah, we're gonna talk about we're in the heart of bull sale season right now. So I hope this is still some timely information for many of you. But how many people do your countertops look like this after just a couple of days? I know that I'm pretty sure that my husband and I are on every single mailing list there is, and this was just, I mean, other than with the exception of a couple semen catalogs, this is what our countertop. Oh, I don't know if that's me. Sorry about that. Yeah, we get just inundated with all the different catalogs and bull sale flyers and postcards, and if it's not coming as paper copies, it's coming through. I see everything on Facebook and my email, and there's just so much information out there. There's just so many. I mean, how do you even begin to sort through it all? Like, where do you even, how do you make heads or tails of it? I mean, literally, when you've got so many good pictures of animals out there, you've got so much data to sort through. Now more than ever, livestock producers, just in general, we have so much different information, so many different things that we measure for. How do you begin to just make sense of everything? So, once we kind of, we figure out where maybe we have a reputable breeder that we go to every year, and they give us some information. Okay, here's the bulls that I've got available. Okay, we can start looking through them. Like those are, we can start comparing them against our contemporary group. Maybe we turn to some of those, where does that information for the bull that I like rank against, the rest of the breed? Then we got to look at the animal himself, and they've got all of their data. And then, oh shoot, we can't forget about the pedigree information. And I got to keep, I got to keep track of all that and who they're related to. I got to look at all the EPDs. I got to look at these indexes. And then I can't forget, I got to look at the bull himself. So how do we tie all of this together to basically when we show up on sale day, or when we sort through that semen catalog to say, hey, this is the guy that I want to use, he's the one that's going to work. How does he get the big circle to say, yep, he's what's going to work for me? Well, if you're like me and love to sort through all the data, awesome. If you are one of those that just is so completely overwhelmed and you just don't know how to even, where do you start? Hopefully I can provide some insight and some help for how do we even begin to sort through all of this. So we've got some tools, different tools for selection. Really, there's three main selection criteria that we can use when we are selecting individuals. And while I'm mostly going to talk about, like we're going to a bull sale and we're actually buying, purchasing bulls to use in a natural service setting, all the information that I'm going to go over is it directly correlates, it's applicable to picking up AI sires. Same type of information. So just depending on how you plan on using those bulls. So the three main things are, we got our phenotype, genotype, pedigree. Genotype, that is the genetic makeup of an animal. What does it's their DNA, that is, it's already coded in them, when by the time that they are born, we know what their genetics are. Phenotype, this is anything that we can see or like physically measure. This is the physical expression of an animal's genotype. Okay, this is what we can actually see. Pedigree, that's their parentage, that's their lineage, that's their, what are they made up of, what is their, their ancestors, all of that. In the middle, so I don't know if you guys can see me when I move the mouse or not, but in the middle of this little Venn diagram here and this little triangle, because all these things, they are correlated, they all play into one another, they are all affected by one another. In that little triangle of these three types of selection criteria is where we need to try to pull out from that information, what is the bull or what are the genetics that we should be using in our herd. So these are all tools in your toolbox. In your operation, you of course are or should be putting more emphasis on maybe one versus the other two, or maybe you do, they all have equal importance to you. That's totally up to you. The point that I want to make though is that we cannot use just one. We need to, again, they all affect one another. We have to use them in combination, all three of them. So I know this is a lot of information that I'm throwing up at you, and just know that I am happy to share these out later on. So don't feel like you have to write this information. I'm sorry, my daughter is up and she is not happy. But just some terminology, because before we go on, it's really important that everybody understands the different terms that I'm going to be using very frequently. So EPD, of course, expected progeny difference. This is the expected difference in performance of an animal's or a sire's progeny compared to the performance of another sire's progeny. EPDs by themselves don't do us any good unless we have something to compare them to, whether it's another animal or we're comparing them to breed average, or I'll get into it later, but we can compare them across different breeds. It means absolutely nothing if we don't have something to compare it to. Otherwise, it's literally just numbers. GEEPD. This is a genomically enhanced EPD. Essentially the same thing as an EPD. We use them the same way. The only difference is that genomic EPDs have a higher accuracy. They have higher accuracy, or they're more reliable calculations. They come from when we submit a DNA sample on an animal, it's coming from that animal's genomic information, or like their DNA. Again, we use them the same way as EPDs, but just know that we can put a little more confidence in an animal's numbers if it says somewhere that these are genomic EPDs. Accuracy, that is the measure of EPD reliability, and it's expressed as a number between 0 to 1. Really, it's 0 to 0.99, because if, basically 1.0 means that it's foolproof, and of course, nothing is guaranteed or foolproof. But just know that the closer a number is to that 1 or that 0.99, the more reliability we have in that animal's data. Okay, so it's a higher accuracy number. Higher numbers just mean that this, again, it's more reliable, it's a better estimate of the sire's genetic value for that trait. And we can increase or improve our accuracy when we do a genomic test and when we get more data on progeny reported. Accuracies change all the time. Accuracy should only go up. However, an animal's EPDs could potentially go down. The more data we get on an animal, that number, that EPD, could go up or down. Maybe that animal was way better for like growth or something than we expected. Maybe once we get more data in, maybe it's actually worse than what we thought. But just know that as we get more data submitted, the accuracy goes up, which will in turn change those EPDs. So the difference between then we've got some different types of traits. We have economically relevant traits, ERTs, versus indicator traits. An economically relevant trait, that is a trait in which changes are associated with either revenue or a dollar amount or cost of production. We have to be able to assign a dollar value to some sort of a phenotypic change or measurement for that trait. A good example would be calving ease direct. And we are going to talk quite a bit about this because I really feel that calving ease direct is a really important one to understand. Now, that's an economically relevant trait versus an indicator trait. Birth weight is an indicator trait. An indicator trait is a trait that adds accuracy to the prediction of an economically relevant trait due to its relationship with that trait. So like I said, birth weight is an indicator of both growth rate and incidence of calving difficulty. That it goes into a calving ease direct trait, or how they calculate that. Dollar index, we're going to talk a lot about these. It's a combination and weighting of multiple EPD performance traits and that relative economic impact into one value. So we're assigning a dollar value to a combination of different traits. They roll them all into one. When the associations are typically the ones that are, that put these numbers out. They combine these traits essentially so that producers can use them for various production scenarios, or what are your end goals? Is it, really, are you you have a maternal oriented herd? Do you retain replacements? Do you sell cattle that need to be, have higher carcass merit? Whatever those end objectives are, they put together a dollar index to help basically combine these different traits together and help you out, kind of streamline things. So when we look at a bull's information, now this is just an example pedigree. Just got this off the internet, but okay, up at the top here, of course, we have that individual's information. This, when I'm talking about the pedigree, this is what, of course, the pedigree is. Sire's always listed at the top, the dam below that. And then we get down here to the data. So these are the animal's EPDs. Because this animal has had data or DNA submitted, they have genomically enhanced EPDs. So that is noted on there. Again, they're basically the same, but we can put a little more confidence. We know the accuracy is going to be a little bit higher because these are GE EPDs. Down at the bottom here, when we see these little these decimal points here, and these numbers, again, they're all lower, of course, than 0.99. These are the accuracy values. And when we look over here, we've got our indexes. And there's only one, of course, listed there. And then right here, I don't have that note, and we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but there are, you can also find quite frequently ratios on an animal, depending on what, the producer, if they put um, a lot of weight in those ratios. Essentially what it is it's kind of, I almost equate it to like an in-herd EPD. So it's, cattle that are reared and managed the same way, same environment, same management settings, and then you're comparing them against one another. So to me, I put a lot of weight in this. If it's like a big herd and they have large groups that are managed together, thing you got to be careful with though is that sometimes, let's say the producer's got 9 head. Well, it doesn't. Sometimes it's obviously the more progeny you get reports on, the more accurate it is. But just know that, so basically 100 would be like that herd's, the average. So what this means, like for her nursing ratio, is that this individual was 7 pounds above the herd's average. For yearling ratio, this animal's 2 pounds above the herd's average. But we'll talk about that more on how to calculate that. So where do we, we get all these numbers? We know that they come typically from, from the associations, they report them, but where do actual EPDs come from? Like, how do they get that data to tell us, where should that number be at? Well, we can get them on an individual. We've got individual performance records. So, the things that we can measure, like a birth weight, a weaning weight, a yearling weight. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we can send that animal's DNA off. I mean, immediately following birth, we can take a DNA sample. We can send that off to one of the, either like a pure breed, when you send it to your, like the Hereford Association, or the Angus Association, they have companies that they have contracted with, and they will evaluate those genomic results. There are also companies out there that will evaluate genomic results from crossbred cattle. So wherever you want to send that off to, that's how, we can get that information on that individual in those ways. We can also get it from, let's pull up here, pedigree information. So we can get it from that individual's sire and dam. So, we can, especially if it's a very popular AI sire, and he's got a lot of, our individual here in question has a lot of half siblings that have information that has been submitted on them. Just a thing to keep in mind is that you should always see higher accuracy values on a sire versus a dam, just because theoretically we should always have more data reported on a sire than we would an actual dam, unless we're really flushing the heck out of her. But anyway, their accuracy values are just going to be a lot higher. We can also, by the time that animal gets older and actually has some progeny of their own, we can get those that progeny's performance data submitted. So just know that as we get more and more pieces of this pie, a piece of this puzzle submitted, our accuracy values are going to increase. Our EPD values are going to be a lot more reliable than, say, that we were just looking at, just like pedigree or just that individual animal. So it's important to know that EPDs are reported in various ways. So they can be, when we're actually looking at those numbers, very commonly they're expressed as pounds, like growth or performance difference. They can be expressed as percentages or the likelihood of an incidence occurring, such as like calving East direct or calving East maternal. They can also be expressed as a dollar value, net dollar amount, net return. And then they can also be expressed as measurements. So like inches, like in, frame score difference, centimeters, like if we're measuring scrotal circumference, changes in marbling scores, like from, going to a select to a choice, or changes or differences in yield grade numbers. So it's really important, and this is where, you got to start doing your own homework. You have to be able to study your breeds or, your bulls in question. You've got to study that breed's EPDs. You've got to know how those numbers are reported. Otherwise, I mean, are you comparing apples to oranges? Because the numbers are not going to make sense if you start trying to compare some of those numbers against one another. It doesn't all add up. So how do we, as I mentioned before, we have to be able to compare EPDs for them to even make sense. Otherwise, like I said, just one individual's EPDs by itself doesn't matter, doesn't mean anything by itself. So I've got bull A, I've got bull B, I've got just some sample EPDs, and then just a description of like what does it mean for these to be, what does this data actually mean? So when we're looking at calving ease direct, as I mentioned, that is one of those that is reported as a percentage. So what for calving ease direct, a higher number is going to be, and that's more ideal. What this means between the two bulls is that the first calf heifers bred to bull A should have a 6% more unassisted births than heifers bred to bull B. Okay, 12 minus 6, that's where I come up with that 6%. That's the difference between the two. So it's basically 12% versus 6%. That's where that's how you read that. Birth weight, okay, that is one of those numbers that's reported in pounds. What this means is that bull A's calves on average should be 2.5 pounds lighter at birth than bull B's calves. It's just 3 pounds minus half a pound. Weaning weight, yearling weight, same thing. And it's really important to stress that on average, right here, there'd be about a 10-pound difference between bull A's calves versus bull B's calves. Here, when we get to yearling weight, about a 25-pound difference. This is one that I threw in there just because I think that not enough people understand, how do you actually read like maternal milk or some of the milk and growth, or sometimes associations just call them milk. It's really important that, and I can't even tell you how to read, proofs and all that in dairy, but for beef, just understand that we are not talking about actual pounds of milk produced. The way that like our milk or maternal milk EPD is reported is it is expressed as pounds of calf weaned due to a result of sire's daughter's milking ability. So what this means, okay, we got a 14-pound difference here. The calves raised by bull A's daughters on average should weigh 14 pounds less than the calves from bull B's daughters at weaning because of his daughter's ability to milk. So again, just know that that's not actually, when you look at that, it's not expressed as actual pounds of milk. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, talk just a little bit about genomically enhanced or GEEPDs. And how do we get that? So we send them that DNA submission, send it off to the company, and then they do work their magic in the lab, and then they send it back. So that information that we're getting comes from the pedigree and the genomic results or DNA test. We get it from performance data, and we get it from progeny data, which should sound very similar to how we get the just regular EPDs submitted, all that information back to us. So the difference is, again, like I already said this multiple times, genomic enhanced EPDs, they just have a higher accuracy. They're more reliable than just an EPD. What they do, so they're going to help predict those higher accuracies for younger animals. This is one of the main benefits of using genomic enhanced EPDs. We can get that information on that animal way sooner than we can by waiting for those progeny reports to come in. So essentially, like I said, we can get DNA samples, we can get genomic EPDs on baby calves before they're even reach sexual maturity, long before that their bone calves even hit the ground. This isn't just something because I'm a visual person, just so that you can see this. What this equates out to is what they call a progeny equivalent. So for some of these different traits right here, this is the progeny equivalent, meaning that in lieu of having actual live calves on the ground, this is what getting a genomic enhanced EPD on that animal results in. It would be for calving ease direct, it would be the equivalent of if that animal already had 26 calves on the ground. For calving ease maternal, it would be as if they had 20 calves on the ground. And you can see the different, the variation right here. Milk, it can be upwards of the equivalent of having 36 calves on the ground. And we know that, some of these bulls, for maybe as short as we use them, that this could be, this is like an entire calf crop. And like I said, they haven't reached sexual maturity yet. But we can get this data so much sooner to know, are they even a worthy breeder, or maybe that is an animal that we want to shy away from, that maybe those numbers aren't quite what we had predicted them at. So anyway, just good information to know that this is why we do the GEEPDs. This is why they are so important, because it's the equivalent of having those live calves already there. They don't even exist yet. So this is what I have tried to do is group some of these EPDs into their, these are kind of the most commonly used EPDs, and I have tried to group them by category. This is your homework. This is what you need to do for the bull breeds that you are considering, or if you're a purebred breeder, obviously, should know where to go to get this information. We just, for time's sake, we are not going to run through every single one of them. That would, I'd have to get you out of here at like 11 o'clock. But just understand that, what do these actually, what do they mean? What do the acronyms stand for? And again, I'm very happy to share all this information so you can kind of see how I have lumped them together. Just know that I've tried to include Black Angus, Red Angus, Simmental, and Hereford, some of their most common, just because those are some of the biggest 3 registries. These are some of what their EPD traits are referred to as. So if we are looking at ease of calving, these are the different traits that we should be paying attention to. And again, when we talk about priorities, I mean, it's all, I'm not saying you have to pay attention to every single one of these traits or every single one of these dollar value indexes. These are just things to be mindful of. And again, it's just kind of how they shake out, how you would, I'd group them together. Performance or production, this, we got our calving ease direct, birth weight, weaning weight, yearling weight, residual average daily gain, dry matter intake, yearling height, scrotal circumference, all of that. We've got our maternal traits listed there. Carcass traits are pretty straightforward. I have included like a CHB dollar index. I've also put CAB on there, and I've just noted that that's not actually, to my knowledge, that's not actually a dollar value index. But if you ever look through like a semen company catalog and see like the little CAB emblem, certified Angus beef, of course, what that means is that they are attributing that sire to be likely to sire calves that would qualify, or cattle that would go into a feedlot and would qualify for a CAB program, if maybe correctly, of course. Then TI, that is a Simmental index, that's a terminal index. Fertility, we got scrotal circumference, heifer pregnancy, and then I've got a whole rundown of dollar value indexes, which we'll talk about in a few slides. And then I've also got some of the maybe more misunderstood or less well-known EPDs, if you want to call them that, for your longevity and management. And I will talk a little bit about this later, but something that I think is a really, really cool EPD is the stayability. That's what Simmentals call it, and I believe Red Angus and Herefords have got the sustained cow fertility. What this tells you basically is just a rundown of what is the likelihood that those females are going to be in the herd between 3 and 6 years of age. And then Herefords, I think they calculate it between like 3 and 12 years of age. So what is the chance that those females, that they are bred for longevity, that they're going to stick around in your herd? And I got a whole bunch of other longevity management tools. Udder teat, if that's important to you, if you really need to be improving your udders in your herd, something to pay attention to. Docility, claw set, foot angle, we'll talk about that when we get to structure. Dollar net energy, mature weight, mature height, all of those. So I said this earlier, but this is one that I really would like to highlight, just because I do think that it's kind of misunderstood, and sometimes I don't think that it's maybe used correctly. But I get this question a lot. What is the difference between calving ease direct and birth weight EPDs? Which one's better? Which one should I use? What's the difference? Okay, I want you to know that birth weight, like we talked about earlier, that is an indicator trait for calving ease. So that goes into, when they're compiling the numbers and all the data for the calving ease direct number, birth weight is one of those traits that goes into making up that data. However, birth weight does not tell us, did that female have any difficulty calving? We know that birth weight, this actual size, weight of that calf, can be largely impacted by environment. Birth weight simply tells us how big, what did that calf weigh when they were born? It tells us nothing else. Calving ease direct, that is the economically relevant trait that will combine the measured birth weights that we submit. And it will also report incidences of calving assistance. Was it a hard pull? Was it a medium pull? No assistance. and it will help alleviate any chances of dystocia. So again, that's based on, it's reported as a percentage of those unassisted births. If nothing else, Kieran Brandt at SDSU, he says that, birth weight is essentially it's obsolete. Well, we still need it. I mean, just understand that basically when you're looking at your calving ease direct, birth weight is being reported in that CED number. So that's what the difference is. And I also threw this in there, maternal calving ease. If you have a maternal based program, if you're keeping back your, your own females for replacements, this is one to be mindful of. This is reported as a difference in the percent of unassisted births in first calf daughters out of that sire. Okay, so that's one to, again, just kind of have on your list of important traits. So now we're gonna talk a little bit about indexes, and just know that again, there's so many different indexes out there, and don't be afraid of them. Don't be, try not to get confused by them. They are meant to help streamline all this data that is in front of you. They are meant to really help out commercial producers especially, but basically it's combining all those different individual traits, and it's putting them, again, it's trying to assign that dollar value and weight it out by importance. So this is, again, because I'm a visual person, this like helped me visualize, like these are, I just took this from the Angus Association, just because they're probably some of the most dollar values that people are the most familiar with. But just so that you can see, okay, so we've got our individual traits listed out right here. And then we've got our different dollar values listed out right here, dollar maternal, dollar wean, all of that. And then you can see this is a combined dollar value right here, how it's got literally almost everything, every trait combined in there. So, why should we be using these indexes? They help to account for those outputs and inputs, and they're really important for matching traits up to your available resources. The big thing to keep in mind is, what is your end goal? Don't get tied down in all the data if it isn't applicable to your operation. If you don't keep calves, past weaning, if you don't feed them out, if you don't have retained interest in them, then don't worry about the different carcass, indexes. Don't worry about, high, carcass merit and marbling and all of that, when you really should just be concerned about maybe some of the maternal, if you keep replacements, and then that growth from birth to wean. Okay, that should be, you need to evaluate your own operation, and again, just cross out, like don't even pay attention to all that extra data if it doesn't pertain to you. So here are just some noteworthy indexes that that kind of some really popular ones. You may see them, in a lot of like different articles and research, things like that. And some of them just that kind of stand out to me as some really cool ones that, again, maybe people don't understand them, so they don't use them as often. But we got our dollar weaned calf value. This is a really popular one. I guess the Angus Association puts this index out, and it's it's valuable if you keep back. I think it's like 20% of your females that are going to be replacement, and basically it's assigning a dollar value to see the growth from birth to a weaned calf. Dollar, the dollar EN, it's a cow energy value. These ones are all specifically Angus, but we've got dollar feedlot, dollar grid, dollar beef, dollar combined. And then again, we got that CAB, which isn't technically an index, but that's just semen companies noting when an animal likely will pass on good carcass characteristics. Some Semitol ones, if you've ever heard of API, that is an all-purpose index. Terminal index, that is if you, of course, as the name implies, that if you have more of a terminal focus, you're not keeping back replacements, the TI is a good number to use. All-purpose index, that is pretty much all inclusive, looking at growth, looking at retaining females, like I said, it's kind of it includes everything in that number. One that I really have, I've talked to a lot of producers about this one, and when they talk about issues with getting first calf heifers, so our 2-year-olds bred, and then calving is 3-year-olds. And I'm having, we have issues. It just seems like it's just so hit or miss. And if they don't hit that very first cycle, then they just fall completely behind. Then they work themselves out of the herd. Well, Okay, if you're a purebred producer, let's look at that stayability. As I mentioned, Red Angus and Simmentals, they call it stability. Herefords sustain cow fertility. They're very similar. Again, it's an incidence, or what is the likelihood that that female is going to still be in the herd from years 3 to 6, or in Hereford it's like 3 to 12, because they're all about longevity. The Red Angus, they've got the Herd Builder and Gridmaster indexes. And I believe, and I could be incorrect on this, and I think this is a newer one, this Profitability and Sustainability Index. And then also we've got like a Baldy Maternal Index, CHB dollars. Those are, of course, perfect ones. So I throw all this information at you, a lot of numbers, a lot of data. What of all of this, it makes sense for you? The first thing that you have got to do when you are evaluating any genetics for your herd is you have got to make a list, whether actually like physically writing this down, pen and paper, or mental note. What are your priorities? And absolutely no one can tell you this besides yourself or your operation, if this needs to be a team or family meeting. What is our focus? Okay, what do we actually, what do we need to improve on? What are we really good at? That's something to also keep in mind, that we don't want to compromise. If we're, we know that we have some really great females, like good udders, good feet and legs, but maybe we need to, maybe we want bigger females. Maybe we are, maybe they're getting a little too moderate. What are things that we're doing well, and where do we want to make improvements on? Okay, is that performance? Is that, maternal traits? And then not to get into Eric and Troy's presentation, but are we keeping our own replacements versus do we have more of a terminal program, whereas all the calves basically become feeder calves? How are our feeder calves marketed? Do we feed out our own cattle? Do we retain interest in our cattle in a feedlot setting? Do we need to pay attention to how those cattle marble? All those carcass traits. Or do we get, are we selling on a grid? What makes sense? Because it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of time chasing your tail on carcass traits if you are not seeing the benefit, if you aren't getting paid to do that. Yeah, it's nice to do it for your neighbor who maybe buys your calves every single year, but, and I know I'm going to sound like a jerk, but if you're not getting paid for that, if he's not doesn't see the value in that, and you're just doing it to be a nice person, then maybe you need to reevaluate your priorities, because there is value in that, and you need to see that before you're going to pay the extra money for those added genetics. Maybe you're a pedigree person. Is there something that, are there certain pedigrees that you are really interested in? Certain cow families that you're really trying to build? Are you, do you pay a lot of focus to phenotype? And this doesn't just have to mean show type cattle, but maybe that is your outlook for for your outlet for your calves. Do you market a lot of showier type animals? Then of course phenotype and type in general just needs to be a higher priority. What type of cattle is that bull going to be breeding? Is it going out with cows versus heifers? Obviously, there's a big difference in what we need to prioritize in terms of our calving needs. And then, are we looking at percentage bulls, our balancers, our sim influence, et cetera, limb flex, all of that. If we are using a bull who is a composite, made up of different breeds, what cross do you, can you use in order to maintain your desired breed percentage within your herd? It's really easy if you want to maintain 50% Simmental and 50% Angus, if you got Sim Angus females and a Sim Angus bull. Okay, super simple. But what if we've got Angus females and a Simmental bull, and we keep back our heifers? At some point, we're either going to have to go back with an Angus bull because we're going to get too high on Simmental, or vice versa, depending on maybe we want to breed them that way. But just knowing that, okay, after so many, F1, F2 process, at what point do I need to maybe go back and switch gears or switch breeds to maintain a certain percentage of my herd? So these are just going to be, I'm just going to roll through these really quick here, but again, happy to share this information. If you are a herd, these are just examples. And again, these are probably not all inclusive because again, I kind of covered the kind of most popular different EPDs among 4 different breeds. But if you are a producer who's selling your entire calf crop at weaning or right after backgrounding phase, these are the EPDs that you should probably be taking note of. Okay, we got our calving ease, EPDs, we got some performance, dollar bean value. Now, if you are a producer retaining your replacement heifers, these are all ones that you should be taking note of. And again, I'm not saying you have to pay attention to absolutely all of them. Some of them don't even pertain based on because may not even be applicable to the breed you're using. But if we're keeping replacements, we've got a whole bunch of different information that we need to be aware of. Plus, we still want to be mindful of those EPDs from that first example when we're talking about calving ease and our performance data. Now, if we are a producer that we have more of a terminal cross, meaning that we're going to sell all of our calves as replacements, we're not keeping back any females to replace our culls or anything like that, then we would use the EPDs from example 1 plus our kind of our carcass merit traits. So in these, I just want to take just wanted to make note of them, I guess. These are just some examples. So these are if you are actually looking at like a semen catalog from some from various companies. They will have their own reported figures that they will use. And again, because they have, they're basically like their own breed. You could say that they have access to all of that reported data that comes back from their bulls. That gets, they can find that information on those measured phenotypes. They can and often do. They will report on different proven sires. Maybe they're really good at that sire has a high incidence of settling females in a timed AI program, or maybe through the sort process, that bull is really excels in when you're using his sex semen. Maybe, and this is kind of a different one. Maybe if you're really, if you're looking for showier type genetics, they actually have kind of an index or a reported figure that's called style genetics, meaning that sire has X number of progeny that have won or done well when they exhibited at the major shows. So kind of neat. They got fertility verified, rock solid, AI proven. They call them different things, and some of these are registered trademarks. But just know that you should be able to find what those different traits, how were they calculated. But then again, like if you're looking for something that really does, a bull that maybe does a great job at settling heifers, like in a timed AI program or synchronization program, that's certainly something to talk to your semen rep about. So in terms of EPDs, you need to know what your breed averages are for the sire you're selecting. Note that not all of the EPDs will start at like a baseline of 0. You got to know where they start at. Not all breeds start at the same baseline number. So when I'm looking, if I've got an Angus bull in front of me and I'm comparing him directly to a Hereford bull, it does not work. We can compare them. Yes, we absolutely can. But you have to convert them because of where those numbers, again, kind of what their baseline is. There, and again, I'll share the link to this, but there's actually EPD calculators, and so you can, I believe they use Angus as sort of the base, so like the kind of the one that you're comparing it to. But what you do is, let's say I've got data on a Simmental bull and I want to compare it to a Hereford bull. I can type in their EPDs, hit submit, and it will run the calculations for me. Otherwise, you can use the BIF. There's a PDF and a website there that will show you how you can do the hand calculations. Now, I put this information up here. This is more of a word of caution versus, I think this is a really great thing. I do think that it is important to know when you are selecting a bull, when you're selecting an AI sire, it's really good to know where does that bull's numbers fall compared to his contemporaries, compared to all the animals within that breed. Obviously, the 50% mark, that's breed average. We've got Simmental here as an example. So, and they've got all the traits ranked out here, and they've got them ranked by is it a good thing or bad thing for high number, low number, etc. They've got kind of done all the work for you. Use this with caution, just because, and we're going to talk a lot about that, but when we're looking at these genetic outliers, these animals that are extremely high for certain traits, be very cautious about making drastic improvements. Number one, do you have the ability to care for these animals do you have the means to provide them with maybe the extra energy, the added performance, all of that? And then looking long term, are you able to care, continually care for these animals that are just going to continually be, increasing in size or milking ability or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So just, it's great to make in genetic improvements, but be careful about making drastic ones. So just some EPD advice before we move on. Know your breed's averages. What are your data parameters? Okay, again, back to that list, like what are your priorities? If there are things that that's, okay, we're doing pretty good, for these traits, but we know that we need to make improvements here. That means that you've got to set your thresholds. What are your selection criteria, the numbers that you're not willing to go below or maybe above on? These, when you're looking through the data, these are your automatic no's. Looking through that catalog, big red X and permanent marker. Don't be enticed by a super flashy bull on sale day, but because he doesn't match up genetically to what you're looking for. And I just said this, but EPDs can allow us to make rapid genetic improvement, or they can make a mess of things really quickly. Be careful on how you use those EPDs. It's they got the data. EPDs are the equivalent. I mean, it makes looking at a phenotype like 7 to 9 times more accurate. But we can also get into a world of hurt if we are trying to make advancements too quickly. And again, like the biggest thing is like feed and energy. If we're trying to really push that performance, but yet we don't make any changes in terms of our management and how we're going to care for those cattle, we're basically going to cause, we're going to have a mess of things where our females don't have enough energy to basically sustain themselves and they'll work their way out of the herd. Watch out for single trait selection. So just don't be focusing too much. Like one that is very common to focus on is, oh gosh, we had a really crappy year last year with calving and we pulled way too many calves. We have got to focus on calving ease direct. And so, low numbers, and we got to, everything's got to be under, this certain above this, and birth rate's got to be under this. Okay, but long term, what is that going to do? We know that birth weight's also an indicator for performance traits. We're going to get, yeah, we want calves born easily, but are we going to get them so small that we have these little pipsqueaks that don't perform later on? What is that going to do to our mature weight on our cows? Are we going to have these teeny tiny little cow size? So just be mindful of that. And then also be cautious of the genetic outliers. Those animals that are just literally like off the charts for various traits. And maybe that number will come down once they get more progeny reported and all of that, and the accuracy improves. But just be really cautious about those animals that are just so far out there, because that is going to either very negatively or drastically impact your herd. Just some selection parameters. Just I want to make people aware that there are really helpful tools out there where you can actually set, you can sort by breed, and then you can actually sort by what are my selection parameters, so that you don't have to sit there with pen and paper and go through them all individually. But works really good for some of the AI companies. So we talked a lot about a genotype. We're going to talk very briefly about pedigree. So, in your breed composites, what are the things that I need to be mindful in terms of, what's really important on that pedigree to me? Again, do you need to maintain a certain percentage of a breed? Outcross pedigrees. Do I need, this becomes really prevalent in certain breeds when we have used a hot and heavy sire for so long. We need to find new pedigrees to breed those females to, because we don't want to run into issues with inbreeding. Genetic carriers, genetic defects, know what those are for your breed. They should have whatever that acronym is for the genetic defect is, and then an F on there, meaning that they are free of that. If it's important to you, coat color, homozygous black. If you don't want to get out the dehorners, homozygous polled, making sure that, if you aren't aware, of course, of the polled status of your cow herds, might be a good idea to use. And then rearing type. And this is where it's always good to, to look to see those helpful little letters at the end of a registered name, ET. If an animal is an embryo transfer calf, keep that in mind. Maybe he had a rock star stellar reset dam that she milked like a house fire. maybe he had a really crappy recip dam and it wasn't his fault, but his genomic EPDs are telling us that, hey, the growth is there. It just, the environment, the rearing type wasn't. Phenotype. We're gonna talk about this because this is very important. We cannot, we can go through all the data, we can go through all the pedigrees, we can look at them on paper, but that is not a replacement for looking at that animal in person. Phenotype is not just for show cattle. We've got to have, big picture, if we want that animal to be around long term, they've got to be well balanced. They've got to have the functionality bred into them for longevity. And then that, of course, all ties in to structure. My judging coach always taught us judge cattle from the ground up. And it took me longer than I care to admit, for that all to make sense. But essentially what he meant is that everything down here, when you are judging structure on cattle, is going to tell you all that you need to know about what's going on up here. And he is 100% right. If something is off with their structure down here, I can guarantee you that their structure up here is not ideal and something is not quite jiving right. Why this is important is because in terms of longevity, we're talking about angulation and cushion and how that animal functions and their locomotion, how they move. If that animal has to get out and travel any distance at all, basically they're just going to wear down on their joints and pasterns and hocks, and it's going to be really uncomfortable for them to move. It also becomes important when we are talking about transmitting those traits to their offspring. So when we're talking about, a big thing that we always really don't mention very much is the front end of an animal. And especially when it comes to, we think about how a calf normally presents itself when it is being born, in the diving position and the front feet out. Do we want to have anything with a ginormous shoulder on it? Or, we want to, it's really important to make sure that how that animal is built is going to make them somewhat more aerodynamic, call it that. Structure, the Angus Association knows that it's really important. They actually have the EPDs out there because they are seeing issues with their heel set and then their claw set. Use this for what it's worth. It's one of those that maybe gets a little bit subjective, but it's really, really important. It's one of those things too. You got to take note of it. Whether you use the EPD, don't use the EPD, you still got to evaluate those cattle in person. So I kind of alluded to this already, but these pictures help sum it up. The front end of an animal is just as important as the back end. So as I was getting at here, that we've got to have angulation to that shoulder. We've got to have right here. This is way too straight. And what this results in is that basically those cattle, the way that they set down, they tend to toe out in front. They also get big and open and coarse about that shoulder. And the way that basically the cushion essentially is just, it tends to wear down. Those cattle are not comfortable. They just get these big, open, wide front ends on them. And it's essentially, if we've got a calf coming out of a heifer, do we want that calf to have the front end look goose, or do we want it to look like this dog right here? Okay, so just something to keep in mind. Also, we have got to watch them walk. And I, of course, didn't want to get in trouble by using any bad structured bulls as an example here. But if you want to see some, talk to me later. I'd love to show you some videos and not get fired over this. But it's really, really important. If you are buying something remote, there's no excuse in this day and age. We've got the technology. We have got to be able, if they don't already have a YouTube video or something for that sale animal, request one. It takes absolutely no time at all for somebody to take a video and send it to you on their phone. Also, why is it that all the sale cattle are in 6 to 10 inches of beautiful clean bed pack? Well, it's because all cattle look good when they're bedded this deep. Also makes them look really big. When you are there in person, make sure you get that animal off the straw, off the corn stalks, get them out onto some bare ground, see them walk. They watch that locomotion. Their back feet need to be setting down where their front feet are picking up. They should not be stiff at all. They should not be paddling out, we call that. That's getting on the outside of their skeleton. You should not be hearing them walk. There should not be anything popping or snapping as they're moving away from you. So that's just a structure in a nutshell. But again, you've got to get there before the sale, walk through the cattle before they've been sorted off and put into their contemporary groups and put into that deep bed pack. Watch them walk in their natural environment. If they don't, if they come up short strided, if they really paddle out, if their front end looks like that big bulldog, they need to be an X. They need to be taken off your list because you don't want to be breeding that into your herd. So plan for success. These are just my recommendations, but I really feel that this is going to help pull all these different pieces together. Start with the data, start with the catalogs. Where are you interested in buying genetics from? Determine what your priorities are, set those selection parameters, and then use those parameters to start whittling down your list of potential sires. Look at those pedigrees. If this is an issue, which sires possibly might be related, or like, half sib, or there's any sort of lineage that matches up to, some of the cow families in your herd. Which of them are, are defect carriers, outcross genetics, all that. And then this is the third thing, but still so incredibly important. Study the bulls in person or view videos of those live bulls. Make sure that what you have narrowed down on paper matches up to what you actually see in person. So selection criteria, just some helpful hints. It's important to make moderate improvements, not drastic changes that you're going to end up regretting. Okay, a little bit of genetic improvement is great, but again, we've got to be really mindful of making too drastic changes. Study the breed's percentile rankings for each EPD. It's good to know where the bull would fall within each category. Again, be mindful of that single trait selection, and then understand what traits going to calculate in the different indexes, which are important to you. And you know what, if there is something that doesn't, if there's an index that you feel that, just that this isn't making sense, that use one to make, use the traits to make your own. I know that a lot of people that have done this use the data to work for you. So just do your homework, make sure that you plan ahead. Don't wait until 2 weeks before turnout to say, hey, I need, I need a bull. Make a list of your priorities. Evaluate the data. Which ones are those automatic no's? Which ones do I need to cross off before I ever even see them in person? Stick to that. Don't have a weak moment and, oh shoot, they come in the ring, they go super cheap. Everyone else probably saw that too. What are their faults? And that's why nobody's been against you. If they're on the no list, keep them a no. Know your budget. Know how much you are able to spend on that individual bull. How many bulls do you need to get? Just keep in mind that if you come to a bull sale and you've got a laundry list of things that you are looking for, you got to be willing to step up and pay for them. Okay, you're not going to come to a bull sale and have a list of 13 very strict criteria and expect to walk out of throw one bid on a bull and get them for that. Just know that those genetically superior animals, other people are finding them too. And then last but not least, study that phenotype, study that structure, make sure that those bulls in person match up to what you're seeing on paper. So I threw this in here just really quickly. These are things that, just talking to friends of mine, these aren't all my ideas, or I can't take credit for all of this. But this is just a kind of a compilation of things that we wish people understood a little better. So again, we talked about this, but watch out for those bulls that are off the charts. And again, can your herd adjust to these outliers? Just because a bull is an expensive bull doesn't necessarily make him a better bull. Are you going there to a bull sale just for the hype and just to get, because you get so caught up in the moment? Or are you willing to do, I got to buy a bull from there, even though I know I'm going to spend like $3,000 more, versus going down the road and, maybe checking out some, other breeders and doing my homework. You need a calving ease bull. Why didn't you say so 3 months ago? Not everybody has calving ease bulls readily available, especially as it gets closer to turnout season. If you know that you need a calving ease bull, you've got to do your homework. You got to get there early. You got to plan ahead. Also, if you can't care for him until turnout, talk to the producer. they want to work with you. Most of them will keep them until, turnout time. You may have to pay for that, of course, but if you don't have a pen to turn him out into, and he's going to be going with your mature bulls and they're just going to beat the crap out of him, talk to the breeder. They don't want him to, to not pass a semen test. They don't want him to get injured, of course. They're proud of those genetics that they're selling to you. If you don't have the means to care for him, talk to them. And then even if you are not interested in buying genetics from a particular breeder, I still encourage you, study the catalogs, study the sires, look for different progeny groups, use that to help determine, do I like, maybe I don't care for like their particular cow families or that particular sire, but are those some of those genetics though that I'm still interested in using like in my own herd? Or maybe are they structural trainer X? Like, oh gosh, I'm seeing that like all these cattle have major issues with with function, or maybe their API is really low or something like that. If you note that and study the other catalogs, study other people's cattle to help make a better decision or sound decision on what you are interested in. And with that, I am finally finished. So yes, if there, I don't know if there are any questions or not, but I guess I would be happy to take any at this time.
So if anyone has any questions for our speaker, you're more than welcome to enter into the chat or even unmute and ask your questions in person.
Melissa, we do have one in the chat box.
Okay.
And it is, what amount of selection should be put on docility?
That is a really good question. I would say, is that an issue that you currently have in your herd? That's one that I do put weight in that. Obviously, we don't report that in the Hereford because that doesn't make a hill of beans difference. But in the Semitols, I know, in Angus, of course, they've got such, and those are the ones I'm familiar with. I study it, but I feel that sometimes the way that is reported may be a little bit subjective. But if it's, again, if it's, they've got a lot of progeny that are recorded for that, yeah, I'd put some weight in that. But unless it's something that you really, really need to focus on in your herd, I guess personally, I don't put a lot of emphasis on docility. I mean, sorry, just to go on.
Oh, no, perfect, thank you.
I just want to say that so much of that has to do with management. We've used genetics before that I didn't know that I'm just a Hereford girl by heart. I didn't know that I was supposed to be looking for that. And somebody told me, oh, why are you using those Semitol genetics? Don't you know that they're really, really bad for docility? And I'm like, holy cow, I did not know that, because just the way that we handle our cattle and, just my husband and I, but I think so much of that has to do with management and their actual environment. So I put a lot less emphasis on that actually.
All right, we do have another one. Can I tie a dollar value to a bull's performance data so that I know how much more I could spend?
Yes, you can. And of course, it's just on average, it's just expected information. But if you, let's say that the difference between like sire A's bulls, I'm going to get, let's say, 10 pounds more per head compared to sire B's bulls. And then I've got that, that difference in added performance times, I can multiply that how many calves I'm expecting to get. And then I can tie that to, well, what would be the difference in potential pounds sold. So yes, you can use EPDs to help predict, like, can I spend a little bit more? Can I make that jump? Can I make that investment to spend a little bit more money on a higher performing individual? Yes.
All right, another one that came in. Why do we have individual EPDs? Why don't we just use the indexes?
Very good question. Yeah. So we actually, we have those individual numbers because they go into, you can see how different ones are used to make the different index, they're compiled differently. And like I said, I know some larger purebred breeders that have actually made their own indexes because they know like this is really important to my customers. And so they'll take those individual traits and sort of build their own index, or maybe they place more emphasis on certain traits. So we basically, they're kind of like the building blocks. We've got to have all those traits individually before we can start combining them into the indexes.
All right, another one. How much of a milk EPD is too much?
So this, I actually want to include this as a slide, but this could really be its own separate presentation. UNL has some great information on that, how much is too much. And then there was a study done by, I think it's the University of Tennessee that actually looked at this. And what they found is that based on our, when our calves, most of our calves hit the ground in the state of Minnesota, based on when we're, I'm comparing that, trying to compare it to the data, when our spring turnout is, and when they're going from the kind of the winter ration to that lush green grass at spring turnout, and when they're playing the nutrition, and when they're actually like peak milk. And essentially what they said is that you want to stay at that low to moderate. If you get to those high milking females, those are the ones that are going to start working their way out of the herd, just because like the reproductive efficiency is going to go down drastically. So what you're going to see is you're going to see some females that, maybe they got bred early on initially when they were younger. And then because they are still growing, their energy demands are so high, they're just going to work their way out of the herd. They're going to have, keep getting bred later and later until eventually they just come up open and we end up, taking them to town. So basically what they said is that just kind of keep it low to moderate. In terms of your milk. Don't, if it's something that you really need to improve on, step it up gradually, but don't do anything too drastic.
So I got one in the chat. When looking at bulls to buy, how young is too young to breed your cows? For example, if they were born on February 26th of last year and you want to start breeding on April 15th.
That should be fine. That should be plenty old enough. I don't know, maybe Dr. Joe wants to weigh in on this, but typically, we wait till ours are about, of course you want your females to be able to, your young females to get ahead of the cows so that they have a little bit more time to recover when you're breeding them subsequently as a, coming 3-year-old when they're first, after their first calf heifer. But what would that be, about 14 months or so? That should be plenty of time. I said Joe wants to weigh in on that, or Troy.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't personally, I try not to count on yearling bulls at all. The idea would be, I think Troy will get into it as well, and Eric in their presentations, but I don't like to count on yearling bulls to cover much at all. But I think they can cover something, but it better not be very much. So I think a year is good. I wouldn't get below 12 months. I think that's really, really pushing it. That's my opinion.
That's all the questions I have so far, Melissa, unless anybody else has any. Oh, I see some more in the chat box here. Troy Salzer did comment generally about 15 cows to a yearling bull. That was his comment. And then the other comment that popped up was most animals go to feedlot buyers, talk to the feedlot owners, and if they don't perform, they will not buy. That was one of the comments in there.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Kevin. I think the big thing that gets at is that if you have a relationship with a feedlot and they're going there and they would like you to select specific genetics that benefit them, you got to get paid for it. That's what it comes down to. If the feedlot wants to dictate the genetics, and you have to pay something to make that happen, they've got to they've got to pay you for that product. So if you're going to customize something or do something that doesn't directly benefit you at the time of sale, or put money into something like carcass traits when you're selling everything straight off the cow, you got to see that price increase. And that's a conversation you have with that feedlot. So I agree. A lot of feedlots will look at how they perform and decide if that source is right for them. But if they want to dictate what genetics are going to happen at the cow calf level, then they got to pay for them.
Joe, I was talking with the carcass data. Feedlot or the guys in sale barns buy your cattle, sell them to a feedlot, and if them cattle don't perform at all, they will not come back to your cattle, or they'll pay you less. So you can't just say no carcass data. That's how I look.
Right.
And I do
No,
retain
I
mine.
agree.
I do retain mine out to Nebraska every year, but I'm not talking. I'm just talking. You sell at a sales barn, they go to a feedlot, and if they don't perform at the feedlot, that buyer's not coming back to you next year. Or if he
Oh, yeah.
does, you're going to take a hit.
Oh yeah, agreed. And I mean, obviously you can't ignore any of these traits, right? I mean, even somebody, you can't ignore calving ease, you can't ignore weaning weights, you can't ignore yearling weights. I mean, you can't ignore any of those big categories, but to take like an extra special focus on it and to put extra money into it, you got to figure out how you're going to get paid for that. So I totally agree. It's a reputation thing. You got to account for all of it.
We've got another comment or question in the chat box, and I think this is going to be going for Troy, but how many cows over how many months? Kind of going back to your comment, and can a yearling bull cover a spring and fall calving group, or is that too much?
So generally speaking, the coverage that we're referring to is that of approximately 3 cycles, so about 63 days. If you shorten that up, you actually decrease the amount of coverage that that particular bull can take care of in relationship to that breeding season. If you decrease it to 2 calving or 2 cycles, 42 days, then you should be increasing the amount of bull power that you're going to be exposing those cows to. And in that particular case, it would be approximately 1/3 more. With yearling bulls, generally speaking, we look at about 15 cows or heifers per bull. For aged bulls, you can increase that to anywhere from about 35 to even up to 50. Not that we recommend that, but it is possible. There are a lot of other factors, the amount of terrain, the amount of space that the cows are spread over. All of those play an important factor. Now, as far as using bulls fall and spring, that is okay, and there should be no problem for them to cover that. And even getting them to 18 months of age will help in increasing their capacity.
We did have another question. Looking at buying open heifers, what is the desired CED or body weight?
That's going to depend on what your breed is. See, yeah, so calving eats direct. They all, like I said, that they all, the different breeds have different averages. And so without knowing exactly what your what breed it is that you're looking at, I can't kind of make a accurate assessment of, I guess, what I would recommend. Again, just stay away from those like super high numbers. Like I know that a lot of people they use, like for Semitol or Hereford, I guess I'll just throw this out there, but anything like over a plus 10 essentially for CED. Is kind of kind of the rule of thumb that makes it, kind of heifer friendly, if you want to call it that. What was the second question, Dana, about body weight or body condition score? Sorry.
Well, it said CED slash or yeah,
Birth weight.
body weight.
Birth weight. Sorry. Okay, that's what. Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry. Yeah, that's me.
That's okay. Sorry.
And then there was a follow-up of Herefords.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. That I can answer. So basically, I would, like I said, obviously pay more attention to that CED. If it's for Hereford specific, I would try to keep it anything above a 10. Hereford breed average, for birth weight, any basically, I would do, personally speaking, we try to do something less than like 2.5. Definitely stay on the south side of a 3.0, but we like to, for our heifers, we do like to stay around that. Greater than a 10, kind of upwards of a 12 for CED, and then birth weight about 2.5 to 3, I guess, is what I'm comfortable with.
The only thing I'll add to that, Melissa, is that it really depends on lifestyle as well. So if you have a day job,
Right.
I mean, make sure that if you need it to work, you can pay more for the calving use direct or look for a higher number, or that's where the percentages come in for that category. Get a bull that's higher, and gives you that peace of mind. So, I mean, someone who can be around the cattle and watch them all the time, and that you can take more chances, right? You can push that birth weight a little bit because we know that's important, because they don't always recover from that, or they don't ever make up those gains. So you don't want to push it too far. But if you got a day job, if you're doing something else, you got to keep that in mind as well, because that's peace of mind. And if you can't be there, I mean, losing a calf is worth a lot. So that's the only thing I'll add to that.
I do know that. Okay. And Joe, I'm going to go on top of that. You need to, I mean, just again, personally speaking, but I really feel very strongly that you need to use a more proven bull for calving ease. Yeah, obviously every year we've got these young bulls that come out and like, oh gosh, the numbers are really stacking up that he is going to be the next calving sire. And I always say, you know what, let's let somebody else fiddle with them for the first couple of years, because I don't want to be experimenting on my heifers. Look for that accuracy. Don't be afraid to use something that's a little bit more proven, got a little bit more age on them. Maybe it's not the the hot genetics. And then also maybe consider using some sex semen. We had that in some of our heifers. We were really worried about, we just had we were getting too small for a little while. And so I'm like, we really I want to make sure I'm getting some heifers out of these, just because we both work off the farm. So it was really, really important to us.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Melissa. I think it's time for us to wrap up. Once again, thank you for attending the UMN Extension Beef Genetics webinar on EPDs and selecting bulls. This presentation has been recorded and shared on the St. Louis County Facebook page. And also everyone who is registered online will receive a link to the recording from tonight's presentation at the conclusion of the webinar series. We have one final evaluation poll that Brenda's going to launch for us. We really want to know what you guys thought about the presentation, what information you retained, and what can help you in the future. Just a reminder that our next webinar will be Tuesday, February 28th. It's right there on the screen, starting at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, and will be on breeding costs, AI versus bulls. And Melinda, if you could hop back a little bit to share your contact information again, just so people can, send you an email, maybe give you a call with all their hard-hitting questions. So after you've fulfilled our poll, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.